The night that changed Renee Crawford's life forever started with a broken heel and a missed bus. She was standing on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Randolph Street in downtown Chicago, watching the number 147 bus pull away without her. The October rain had started 30 minutes ago and showed no signs of stopping. Her beige trench coat was soaked through. Her red scarf clung to her neck like a wet rag, and her left heel had snapped clean off somewhere between the hotel lobby and the bus stop. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, and Renee Crawford was done. Done with her second job at the boutique hotel near the Magnificent Mile. Done with rich tourists who complained about thread counts while she smiled through exhaustion. Done with the $127,000 debt that hung around her neck like a noose, left behind by her mother's cancer treatments and her mother's death and her mother's absence that still felt like a fresh wound even 2 years later. Renee was 27 years old, and she felt like she was drowning. She hobbled toward the nearest awning, her broken shoe slapping against the wet pavement. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the city into a blur of headlights and neon signs. Red light from a nearby bar splashed across the sidewalk like blood. That's when she saw him. He was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, maybe 20 feet away, completely motionless. A Korean man in an expensive black suit with a crisp white shirt underneath. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and rain ran down his face like tears, but he wasn't moving, wasn't seeking shelter, wasn't even blinking. Before we continue with this story, I need you to do something for me. I pour my heart into these stories, and it genuinely hurts when people watch without subscribing. Please, just take 1 second and subscribe. It's free, and it means the world to me. Also, like the video and drop a comment telling me which city you are watching from. I want to know where all my amazing viewers are located. Please do well to subscribe now. Now, let's continue. He was just standing there, staring at nothing, like a man who had forgotten how to exist. Renee's first instinct was to keep walking. Her mother had raised her with clear rules about strange men on dark streets after midnight. Rule number 1 was simple: mind your business and get home safe. But something about this man made her pause. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, like the weight of the world had finally become too heavy to bear. Maybe it was the emptiness in his eyes, visible even from 20 feet away. Or maybe it was the blood dripping from his right hand, mixing with the rain and swirling down toward the storm drain. He was bleeding, standing in the rain, making no effort to help himself. Renee had seen that look before. In the mirror, the night her mother died. The look of someone who had stopped caring whether they lived or died. Before she could talk herself out of it, she was walking toward him. Her broken heel dragged against the concrete. Rain hammered against her clear umbrella. Every step felt like a mistake, but she kept going anyway. She stopped right beside him and raised her umbrella high enough to cover them both. For a long moment, nothing happened. He didn't acknowledge her presence, didn't turn his head, didn't speak. The rain drummed against the umbrella like impatient fingers, and Renee wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Then he moved. His head turned slowly and his eyes found hers. They were dark brown, almost black and completely empty. But as he looked at her, really looked at her, something flickered in their depths. Confusion, maybe, or wonder, like he was seeing something impossible. His hand reached toward the umbrella handle. Their fingers almost touched. Renee felt electricity run up her arm. "You're bleeding," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. He looked down at his hand like he had forgotten it was attached to his body. Blood was oozing from a gash across his palm, deep enough that it probably needed stitches. "I know," he said. His voice was low and rough with the faintest trace of an accent. "There's a pharmacy 2 blocks down. They can bandage that for you." "I know that too." "Then why are you just standing here?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at her with those empty eyes, like she was speaking a language he had forgotten how to understand. Like kindness was a foreign concept that no longer computed. Renee should have walked away. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to leave this strange, bleeding man alone and get herself home. But she couldn't move. Something was holding her there, some force she couldn't name or explain. "What's your name?" he asked finally. The question surprised her. "Why does it matter?" Because I'm going to remember it for the rest of my life. Coming from anyone else, that line would have sounded ridiculous, like a bad pickup attempt from a drunk guy at a bar. But this man wasn't drunk. He wasn't trying to impress her. He said it like a statement of fact, like he was simply describing the weather or the time of day. "Renee," she said, against her better judgment. "My name is Renee." He repeated it softly, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "Renee!" Then he did something that made her heart skip a beat. He took her hand from the umbrella handle, gently, deliberately, like she was made of glass, and held it. His skin was cold from the rain, but his grip was warm, strong, like he was holding onto a lifeline. "Thank you, Renee," he said, "for stopping. I just shared my umbrella. It's not a big deal." "It is to me." She wanted to ask what he meant. She wanted to ask why he was bleeding, why he was standing in the rain, why he looked like a man who had given up on everything. But before she could form the words, movement caught her eye. 3 black SUVs were parked across the street. She hadn't noticed them before, but now she saw men inside them, hard-faced men in dark suits who were watching this interaction with laser focus. One of them had stepped out of the lead vehicle and was walking toward them, his hand hovering near his waist in a way that suggested he was carrying a weapon. Renee's blood ran cold. The man beside her raised one hand without looking. A simple gesture, almost casual, but the effect was immediate. The approaching man stopped in his tracks, nodded once, and retreated to his vehicle. "Who are you?" Renee whispered. The stranger with the bleeding hand looked at her for a long moment. Rain continued to fall around them, but under the umbrella, they were in their own private world. "Someone who forgot what kindness feels like," he said, "until tonight." Then he released her hand, stepped back into the rain, and walked toward the waiting SUVs. The men scrambled to open doors for him, to bow their heads as he passed, to treat him like royalty. He paused at the door of the lead vehicle and looked back at her one last time. "Good night, Renee Crawford," he said. She hadn't told him her last name. The SUVs pulled away into the night, and Renee stood frozen on the sidewalk, her umbrella dripping, her heart pounding, and a single question burning in her mind. What had she just gotten herself into? Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. 3 days passed, and Renee convinced herself the encounter had been a strange dream. She went back to her normal life, if you could call it that. Wake up at 6 a.m., take the bus from her small apartment in Pilsen to her day job at a struggling real estate office in the Loop. Smile at clients, answer phones, pretend she wasn't dying inside, then take another bus to the boutique hotel for her night shift, smile at tourists, carry bags, pretend she wasn't drowning in debt. Repeat until dead. That's what her life had become. An endless cycle of work and exhaustion and loneliness, punctuated only by occasional phone calls with her best friend Corrine and visits to her mother's grave in Oakwood Cemetery. She didn't tell Corrine about the man in the rain. She didn't tell anyone. What was there to tell? She had shared her umbrella with a stranger, he had acted weird, and then he had driven away in a convoy of SUVs like some kind of crime boss. Actually, when she put it that way, it sounded exactly like something she should tell someone. But she didn't, because part of her wanted to keep the memory private. Part of her kept replaying the way he had looked at her, the way he had said her name, the way his hand had felt in hers. Cold skin, warm grip, like a man who hadn't touched another person in years. On the 4th day, everything changed. Renee was grabbing coffee at a cafe near her office, standing in line with her earbuds in, trying to pretend she wasn't exhausted, when a man in a black suit appeared beside her. "Run Crawford," he asked. She pulled out one earbud. "Who's asking?" He didn't answer. He just handed her a thick envelope and walked away before she could respond. Runna stood there, coffee forgotten, staring at the envelope in her hands. It was heavy, too heavy for paper alone. She found a quiet corner of the cafe and opened it. Her hands started shaking. Inside was money, stacks and stacks of $100 bills bound together with paper bands. She counted quickly, her heart hammering in her chest. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. There was $50,000 in cash, inside the envelope. And a handwritten note in elegant script. For your kindness, there's more if you let me see you again. S. Runa's first instinct was to run, to drop the envelope and flee the cafe and pretend this wasn't happening. This was drug money, blood money, the kind of money that got people killed. But she couldn't move. She kept staring at the note, at the elegant handwriting, at that simple letter S. The stranger in the rain, the man with the bleeding hand, he had found her. How? She had only given him her first name. How had he tracked her down? How did he know where she got her morning coffee? Her hands were still shaking when she found a second note at the bottom of the envelope. I know about your mother's debt. I can make it disappear, all of it. Meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the address below. Come alone. The address was for a restaurant in Chinatown that Rana had passed 100 times but never entered. She had always assumed it was closed. The windows were dark. No one ever went in or out. But apparently it wasn't closed. It was private. And someone with very deep pockets wanted to meet her there. Rana spent the next 24 hours in a fog. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the envelope hidden under her mattress and the impossible choice in front of her. She should go to the police. She knew that. Whatever this was, whatever the man with the bleeding hand was involved in, it was clearly illegal. Normal businessmen didn't hand out $50,000 in cash. Normal businessmen didn't have convoys of armed guards. But the police couldn't erase $127,000 in debt. And Rana was so tired of drowning. She called Karan that night, hopping for advice without having to explain the full situation. Hey girl, what's up? Karan answered. I need you to tell me something crazy is a bad idea. Depends on the crazy. Are we talking bad haircut crazy or federal prison crazy? Somewhere in between. Karan was quiet for a moment. Rana, what's going on? You sound weird. Nothing, I met someone. Like a guy. Yeah. About time. You've been living like a nun since your mom passed. What's he like? Rana thought about the man in the rain, his empty eyes, his cold hand, the way his men had bowed to him like servants. Complicated, she said finally. He's complicated. Complicated is fine. Complicated is interesting. Just don't let complicated turn into dangerous, okay? Too late, Rana thought. Way too late. The next evening, Rana stood outside the restaurant in Chinatown, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She was wearing her best dress, a simple black number she had bought for her mother's funeral, and she felt ridiculous, like she was playing dress-up for a meeting with the devil. She had left the $50,000 at home. She wasn't keeping it. That was the whole point of this meeting. She was going to return the money, tell this stranger to leave her alone, and go back to her normal, exhausting, drowning life. That was the plan. The door to the restaurant opened as she approached, held by a man in a black suit who nodded respectfully. Inside, the space had been transformed. What looked abandoned from outside was actually elegant within. Soft lighting, expensive furniture, fresh flowers on every surface. And at the center of it all, sitting at a table set for two, was the stranger from the rain. He rose when he saw her. He was wearing another perfectly tailored black suit, but this time his hair was styled, his hand was bandaged, and his eyes weren't empty anymore. They were focused, intense, fixed on her like she was the only thing in the room worth looking at. You came, he said. His voice was warm with something that sounded like relief. Rana stopped at the edge of the table and reached into her purse. She pulled out the envelope, minus the notes, which she had kept as evidence, just in case, and threw it on the white tablecloth. I'm not for sale, she said. He didn't flinch, didn't look offended. If anything, he looked impressed. I'm not trying to buy you. Then what is this? He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, please, let me explain. Every instinct told her to run, but Rana was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of letting life happen to her instead of making choices of her own. She sat. The man sat across from her. Up close, he was even more striking than she remembered. High cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that seemed to see right through her. My name is Spudgeon Park, he said, and I owe you an explanation. You owe me more than that. You had someone follow me. You tracked down my home address, my coffee shop, my mother's debt. That's not flattering. That's terrifying. I know, and I'm sorry. It wasn't meant to frighten you. It was meant to show you that I'm serious. Serious about what? Spudgeon was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more intimate. I've been surrounded by people my entire life. Employees, associates, people who want things from me: money, power, protection. Every interaction is a transaction. Every kindness has a price. He looked at her with those intense eyes. But you didn't want anything. You saw a stranger bleeding in the rain and you stopped. You shared your umbrella. You asked if I was okay. And you expected nothing in return. That's just being a decent person. Not in my world. Rana felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly is your world? Spudgeon hesitated. She could see him calculating, deciding how much to reveal. I run a business, he said finally. A large one, with complicated operations and difficult partners. There are people who would do anything to hurt me, and they would use anyone close to me to do it. That sounds like more than just a business. It is. Are you going to tell me what it really is? Another pause. Not yet. I don't want to scare you away. Too late. Spudgeon smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. Fair enough, he said. Then let me make you a different offer, one with no strings attached. I'm listening. Your mother's dulk, 127 zara, accumulated over 3 years of cancer treatment at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The collectors call you twice a week. You've been paying the minimum for 2 years and barely made a dent. Runna's stomach clenched. How do you know all that? I told you. I'm serious. I had my people research everything about you. That's not comforting. I know, but here's my offer. I pay off the debt. Tonight, all of it. And in return, you give me something I can't buy. What? Dinner, once a week. Conversation. Someone who looks at me like I'm a human being instead of a weapon or a wallet. Runna stared at him. You want to pay off $127,000 for dinner conversation. I want to pay off $127,000 for normalcy. For 1 hour a week where I'm not Spudgeon Park, CEO. Where I'm just a man sharing a meal with a woman who doesn't owe me anything. It was insane. The whole thing was insane. Rich men didn't pay off massive debts for dinner dates. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. But looking at Spudgeon's face, Runna saw something she recognized. The same loneliness she saw in her own mirror every night. The same desperate hunger for connection. Against every rational thought in her head, she heard herself say, 3 dinners. I'll give you 3 dinners, then I'm out. Spudgeon's eyes lit up. 3 dinners. And I'm keeping the $50,000 as a security deposit, in case you turn out to be a psycho. Fair enough. And you stop having people follow me. A pause. I'll consider that. Not good enough. I have enemies, Runna. People who would hurt you just to hurt me. The surveillance isn't about control. It's about protection. Protection from what? Spudgeon's jaw tightened. From a world you're not ready to know about yet. They stared at each other across the table. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Fine, Runna said finally. But if I see one of your guys lurking outside my apartment, the deal is off. Understood. She stood up and grabbed her purse. I'll see you next week, Siajan Park, and I'm choosing the restaurant. She walked out without looking back, her heart hammering in her chest. What had she just agreed to? Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. 3 dinners turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. 10 turned into Renee losing count. Every week, she found herself sitting across from Siajan in a different restaurant, learning the strange geography of a man who seemed to have everything except peace. He took her to places she had never imagined. Private rooms in steakhouses where the waiters knew his name, rooftop gardens with views of the Chicago skyline, a yacht docked at Navy Pier that apparently belonged to him. But it wasn't the money that kept her coming back. It was him. Siajan was nothing like she expected. He was quiet but not cold, intense but not cruel. He asked questions about her life, real questions, not small talk, and he listened to her answers like they mattered. She told him about her mother, about growing up in Inglewood on the South Side, about the scholarship to Northwestern that had felt like a miracle and the cancer diagnosis that had shattered everything, about dropping out to care for her mother, watching her fade away, burying her in a cemetery she still visited every Sunday. Siajan listened to all of it without judgment, without pity, just listening. And slowly, he started sharing pieces of himself too. He told her about Korea, about his father, a powerful businessman who had raised his sons like soldiers, about his older brother, Minyu, who had been groomed to inherit everything until Siajan proved himself more capable. "My father believed in competition," Siajan said one night, swirling wine in his glass. "He thought it made us stronger. He didn't understand that it was tearing us apart." "What happened to your brother?" Siajan's face darkened. He made choices, bad ones, and he paid for them. "Is he still alive?" A long pause. "Yes, unfortunately." Renee didn't push. She could tell there was more to the story, but Siajan wasn't ready to share it. And honestly, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. Because by the 10th dinner, Renee had to admit something to herself. She was falling for him. It was stupid, dangerous, completely irrational. She didn't even know what he really did. She didn't know why he had armed guards, or why he had been bleeding in the rain, or why his eyes sometimes went cold in a way that made her blood freeze. But when he looked at her, really looked at her, with those intense dark eyes, she felt seen. For the first time since her mother died, she felt like someone actually cared whether she was okay. She tried to fight it. She reminded herself of all the red flags. She had long conversations with Corrine about the insanity of dating a man she barely knew. "He paid off your mom's debt," Corrine had asked, eyes wide. "All of it in one night." "Girl, who is this man?" "I don't know, that's the problem." "And you're still seeing him?" "It's just dinner." Corrine gave her a look that said she wasn't buying it. "Renee, baby, I love you, but you need to be careful. Men with that kind of money don't just hand it out. There's always a price." "He hasn't asked for anything." "Yet." But weeks passed, and Siajan still didn't ask for anything. He didn't pressure her for physical intimacy, didn't try to control her schedule, didn't even push her to spend more time with him than she wanted to. He just waited, like a man who had learned that the things worth having couldn't be rushed. It was on the 12th dinner that everything changed. They were at a jazz club in Hyde Park, one of those intimate venues where the music wrapped around you like a blanket. Siajan had been quiet all night, preoccupied with something he wouldn't share. After the show, as they walked along the sidewalk, Renee's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ask him who he really is." Her blood ran cold. "What's wrong?" Siajan asked immediately. She showed him the text. His face went pale. "We need to leave, now." Before she could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Juno, Siajan's second-in-command, was driving. Siajan practically pushed Renee into the back seat before climbing in after her. "What's happening?" she demanded. Siajan didn't answer. He was on his phone, barking orders in Korean. "Siajan, talk to me." He hung up and looked at her. In the dim light of the SUV, his face looked haunted. "Someone knows about you, about us." "Someone who?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with a truth he could no longer hide. "I run the most powerful Korean syndicate in the Midwest. We control territory from Chicago to Indianapolis. Drugs, gambling, protection. My name keeps businesses safe and my enemies afraid." Renee felt the world tilt beneath her. "I'm not just a businessman, Renee. I'm a crime boss. And the man who sent you that text, my brother Minyu, just got released from prison. He's coming for everything I have." She stared at him. Her mind was racing, trying to process what she was hearing. "And now," Siajan continued, his voice cracking slightly, "he knows I have something I care about, something he can use against me." "Me," Renee whispered. Siajan nodded. "You." The SUV raced through the Chicago streets. and Renee felt her entire world collapse around her. Siajin took Renee to a hotel, not just any hotel, but the Peninsula Chicago, one of the most expensive in the city. He got her a suite on the top floor, installed 4 armed guards in the hallway, and then sat across from her in the living room while she processed everything he had told her. "You lied to me," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. "I protected you." "From what? The truth. That's not protection, that's control." Siajin flinched like she had slapped him. "I know, and I'm sorry. But if I had told you the truth from the beginning, you would have run, and I couldn't." He trailed off. "Couldn't what?" "I couldn't lose you." His voice was barely a whisper. "Not before I even had you." Renee stood up and walked to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out before her, glittering with 1,000 lights. Somewhere out there, a man she had never met was plotting to use her as a weapon against the man she was falling in love with. "Tell me about your brother," she said. Siajin was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "Minyu is 2 years older than me. When we were children, we were close. Best friends, even, but my father. He believed in pitting us against each other. He thought competition made us stronger." "What happened?" "I won, not because I wanted to, because I had to survive. By the time I was 25, I was running most of the organization. Minyu was marginalized, humiliated. And..." Siajin pulled down the collar of his shirt, revealing a thick scar that ran from his collarbone to the center of his chest. "4 years ago, he tried to kill me, broke into my home at night with a knife. He wanted to cut out my heart." Renee felt sick. "Your own brother." "I survived, barely, and when our father found out, he disowned Minyu completely, testified against him in court, had him sent to prison in Korea. But he's out now." "He's out now," Siajin's jaw clenched. "And he's been building alliances with every enemy I have, rival organizations, disloyal lieutenants, anyone who wants to see me fall." "What does he want?" "Everything, the organization, the territory, my life." Siajin looked at her with haunted eyes. "And now you." Renee turned away from the window. Her mind was spinning, trying to process the nightmare she had stumbled into. "I should leave," she said. "Walk away from all of this, go back to my normal life." "You could," Siajin agreed. "I would understand, I would let you go." "Would you?" A long pause. "No, I would try, but I don't think I could." Renee laughed bitterly. "That's not comforting." "I know." They stood there in silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both of them. Finally, Renee spoke. "I'm not running." Siajin's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me. I'm not running. I'm not going to let some psychopath I've never met dictate my life." She walked toward him, stopping just inches away. "But we do this my way. No more lies, no more secrets." "Renee." "And I want to meet him." Siajin stared at her like she had lost her mind. "You want to meet Minyu?" "I want to look at the man who's threatening me and let him see that I'm not afraid." "That's insane. He's dangerous. So are you." Renee held his gaze. "But I'm still here." The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken emotion. Then Siajin did something unexpected. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, gently, reverently, like she was something precious. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he whispered. "Or the stupidest. Maybe both." And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like a question he was afraid to ask. But when Renee kissed him back, when she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, it became something else entirely. Desperate, hungry, like 2 people who had been starving for years and finally found food. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Siajin pressed his forehead against hers. "I'll set up the meeting," he said, "but you stay behind me the whole time, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you run. Promise me." "I promise." But even as she said the words, Renee knew she wasn't going to run. She was done running. Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. The meeting took place 3 days later at a neutral restaurant in Wicker Park. Neutral was a relative term, of course. Siajin brought 20 armed men. Minyu brought 10. They lined the walls like statues, hands hovering near their weapons, ready to turn the dining room into a war zone at the slightest provocation. Renee wore red, not because Siajin asked her to, but because she wanted Minyu to see her clearly, wanted him to understand that she wasn't some trembling victim. She was a woman from Inglewood who had buried her mother and survived. She had faced worse than a bitter rich boy with daddy issues. At least, that's what she told herself. Minyu arrived late. A power play, Siajin muttered, and when he finally walked through the door, Renee understood why Siajin had been so afraid. He looked almost exactly like his brother. Same height, same build, same handsome face. But where Siajin's eyes held pain and loneliness, Minyu's held nothing. They were empty in a way that went beyond sadness, sociopathic, like a shark examining potential prey. "So you're the woman who tamed my brother," Minyu said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I didn't tame anyone. I just shared my umbrella." Minyu laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Ah yes, the umbrella story. Siajin told me. Very touching." He leaned forward, his empty eyes fixed on hers. "Tell me, Renee Crawford from the South Side, did my brother also tell you about the 12 men he killed last year, or the family he destroyed in Detroit, or the warehouse full of drugs he—" "Enough," Siajin's voice was sharp. Minyu held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just making sure your girlfriend knows who she's sleeping with." Renee felt Siajin tense beside her, but she laid a hand on his arm. "I know exactly who he is," she said, meeting Minyu's gaze. "The question is, do you?" Minyu's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me." "You're the one who tried to cut out your own brother's heart while he slept. You're the one who embezzled from your father's organization and got caught. You're the one who spent 4 years in prison planning revenge instead of taking responsibility for your own failures." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You don't get to sit there and judge Siajin," Renee continued, "when you're the reason he had to become what he is. He didn't want this life. You forced it on him." Minyu's smile froze. The mask of charm slipped, revealing the fury beneath. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, little girl." "And you have no idea who you're dealing with." Renee leaned forward, matching his posture. "I grew up on the South Side. I've seen men scarier than you on my morning commute. So whatever game you're playing, understand this. I'm not your pawn." For a long moment, Minyu just stared at her. The armed men along the walls tensed, sensing the shift in energy. Then Minyu laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "I like her," he said to Siajin. "I can see why you're so attached." He stood, straightening his jacket. "But attachment is weakness, little brother, and weakness gets people killed." He nodded to Renee. "We'll meet again, Renee Crawford, and when we do, it won't be in a restaurant." He walked out without looking back. His men followed. Siajin let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "That could have gone worse," he said. Renee's hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fatting, leaving her weak and terrified. "Did I make things worse?" Siajin looked at her with something like awe. "No, you just showed him something he's never seen before." "What?" "Someone who's not afraid of him." He took her hand. "You were incredible." But as they left the restaurant, Renee couldn't shake the chill that had settled in her bones. Minyu had whispered something to her as he passed, 4 words that Siajin hadn't heard. "He'll choose the organization." She told herself it was just psychological warfare, just a bitter man trying to plant seeds of doubt. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine, she was terrified that Minyu might be right. 2 weeks passed without incident. Renee moved into Siajin's penthouse in the Gold Coast, not because he insisted, but because she refused to let fear drive her decisions. If Minyu was coming for her, he would find her standing beside the man she loved, not hiding in her apartment in Pilsen. And she did love him. She had admitted it to herself somewhere between their first kiss and the night she woke up screaming from a nightmare about Minyu and found Siajin holding her, whispering that everything was going to be okay. She loved a crime boss, a man with blood on his hands and enemies at every corner. Her mother would have been horrified. But her mother was gone, and Renee was tired of living her life according to other people's expectations. The 2 weeks felt almost normal, almost peaceful. Siajin went to work during the day, meetings, phone calls, the mundane operations of running an empire, and came home to her at night. They cooked together, watched movies, argued about whether Chicago deep dish was real pizza, did all the ordinary things that ordinary couples did. Except for the armed guards in the hallway, and the bulletproof windows, and the encrypted phones. Minor details. Renee used the time to reconnect with her own life. She visited Corrine, who was horrified by the security team that followed Renee everywhere, but eventually admitted that Siajin's men were at least polite. She went back to her mother's grave and stood there for 2 hours, talking to the headstone about everything that had happened. "I know this isn't what you wanted for me, Mom," she said, "but I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." The grave didn't respond. Graves never did. But Renee felt a warmth in her chest that she chose to interpret as approval. On the 14th day, the calm shattered. Siajin burst into the penthouse at 3 a.m., his face white, his phone in his hand. "We have a problem." Renee was already awake. She had been reading, unable to sleep, and she could see immediately that something was very wrong. "What happened?" "One of my top lieutenants flipped. Minyu got to him. He's been feeding information to my enemies for months." "How bad is it?" Siajin's jaw clenched. "Half the organization is compromised. Minyu has turned at least 30% of my men against me, and they're making their move tonight." Renee's blood ran cold. Tonight. Multiple locations across the city. They're hitting our businesses, our safe houses, His phone buzzed. He looked at it and went even paler. "What?" Renee demanded. "One of my warehouses just exploded. 3 of my men are dead." The next hour was chaos. Siajin was on the phone constantly, barking orders in Korean and English, coordinating his forces against an assault happening on multiple fronts. Renee felt useless, watching him work, knowing there was nothing she could do to help. "You should leave the city," Siajin said between calls. "I can get you on a plane to Los Angeles. You'd be safe there while." "No." "Renee, this isn't a game. People are dying. If Minyu gets his hands on you, then he'll have to go through you first." She walked toward him and took his face in her hands. "I'm not running. We face this together or not at all. You could die. So could you, and I refuse to spend whatever time we have left apart." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Siajin pulled her close and held her like she was the only solid thing in a world falling apart. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had said the words. "I love you too." And then his phone rang again, and the moment shattered. The battle for Chicago was just beginning. The attack came at 2 a.m. on the 3rd day of the war. Siajin was at the penthouse, strategizing with Juno and a handful of loyal lieutenants. Renee was in the bedroom, trying to sleep despite the sound of hushed, urgent voices from the living room. She never heard the men come in. One moment she was drifting off, and the next a hand was clamped over her mouth and someone was dragging her out of bed. She tried to scream, tried to fight, but there were too many of them, 3 men in black masks who moved with military precision. They injected her with something that made her limbs go heavy and her vision blur. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was Siajin bursting through the bedroom door, a gun in his hand, screaming her name. Then everything went black. Renee woke up in a warehouse. She could tell it was near water. She could hear waves, smell the brackish rot of the Chicago River. Her hands were bound to a chair, and her head was pounding from whatever they had drugged her with. And standing in front of her, smiling that empty smile, was Minyu. "Good morning, Renee Crawford," he said. "Welcome to the end of the game." Renee tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She settled for glaring at him with all the hatred she could muster. "Don't look at me like that," Minyu chided. "I'm not going to hurt you, not yet anyway. You're bait, not a target." "Siajin will come for me," she rasped. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Minyu's smile widened. "That's the whole point. He's been impossible to pin down, you see, too careful, too cautious. But he has a weakness now, a big, obvious weakness that he can't resist protecting." He leaned close, his breath hot on her face. "You." Renee spat at him. It was childish and ineffective, but satisfying nonetheless. Minyu wiped his cheek with an expression of mild annoyance. Spirited, I can see why he likes you, he straightened. But spirit won't save you. When Siajin arrives, and he will arrive because he's predictable in his devotion, I'm going to make him watch while I take everything he cares about. His organization, his territory, his future. He paused. And then I'm going to make him watch while I take you. Renee felt cold terror grip her heart, but she refused to let it show. He'll kill you, she said. He'll tear you apart. Maybe, but I doubt it, because Siajin has always been soft. He feels things, cares about things, and that's why he'll always lose to me. Minyu walked toward the door. Get some rest, Renee. The show starts soon. He left, and Renee was alone with her fear. But she wasn't helpless. Her mother hadn't raised a victim. Her mother had raised a fighter. As soon as the door closed, Renee started working at the ropes, binding her wrists. Siajin brought 30 men to the warehouse. It wasn't enough. Minyu had 50, maybe more, but Siajin didn't care about the numbers. He didn't care about strategy or tactics or the smart play. All he cared about was Renee. The assault began at midnight. Gunfire erupted across the industrial district near the Chicago River, the sound of battle echoing off concrete walls and metal shipping containers. Siajin fought at the front of his forces, moving with a ferocity that terrified even his own men. This was not the quiet businessman who sat in boardrooms and negotiated deals. This was the weapon his father had forged, the killer that lived beneath the civilized surface. And he was carving a path through Minyu's men like death itself. Juno stayed close, covering his flank, shouting warnings about incoming threats. Siajin barely heard him. All he could think about was Renee, alone, afraid in the hands of his psychopath brother. If Minyu hurt her, if he touched her, Siajin would tear him apart with his bare hands. Inside the warehouse, Renee heard the battle approaching. The ropes around her wrists were loosening, but slowly, too slowly. Blood was running down her fingers from where the rough fibers had torn her skin. Minyu burst in, his calm demeanor shattered. He's here earlier than expected. He grabbed Renee's chair and dragged her toward the center of the warehouse, positioning her as bait. No matter, this works too. The door exploded inward. Siajin stood in the doorway, backlit by flames from somewhere outside. He was covered in blood. Renee couldn't tell if it was his or someone, and the gun in his hand was steady as a rock. Let her go, Minyu. Minyu pulled a knife, long, curved, familiar, the same knife that had left the scar on Siajin's chest. Welcome, little brother. I've been waiting for this for 4 years. He pressed the blade against Renee's throat. She felt the cold steel bite into her skin. Drop the weapon, or I end her right now. Siajin's gun wavered. His eyes met Renee's, desperate, terrified, full of love. Then he dropped the weapon. Minyu laughed. I told you, Renee, he'd choose. They always choose the organization. But you made him choose love. That makes you his greatest weakness. No, Renee said, her voice steady despite the blade at her throat. That makes me his greatest strength. And then she moved. The ropes had loosened just enough. She threw her elbow back into Minyu's face with every ounce of strength she possessed. He stumbled, the knife slipping from her throat, and she twisted away. Siajin was moving before Minyu could recover. The brothers crashed together, years of hatred exploding in fists and blood. They fought like animals, like men who had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. Siajin won. He always won, because he had something Minyu never understood, something worth fighting for. He had Minyu on the ground, hands around his brother's throat, ready to squeeze the life out of him. Do it, Minyu gasped. Finish what you started. Siajin's hands tightened. His eyes were wild, lost in fury and pain and 4 years of nightmares about this moment. Siajin. Renee's voice cut through the red haze. Siajin, look at me. He looked. If you kill him, you become what he says you are, a monster, a murderer. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her voice was steady. And I can't love a monster. For a long moment, nothing moved. The sounds of battle continued outside, but inside the warehouse, everything was frozen. Then Siajin released his grip. Minyu gasped. sucking in air, staring up at his brother with something like disbelief. "Federal agents are on their way," Siajan said, his voice hollow. "I've been cooperating with them for months, building a case against you, gathering evidence." Minyu's eyes widened. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, and every day you'll know that I could have killed you, that I had every right to kill you, and I chose not to." He stood up and walked away from his brother without looking back. "That's my revenge." Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. 6 months later, Chicago, spring. Renee stood outside Northwestern University, holding an acceptance letter in her hands. Full scholarship, pre-med program, a second chance at the future she had given up. Her mother's debt was gone. Her nightmares were fading, and the man walking toward her across the campus lawn was the reason for all of it. Siajan looked different these days, lighter somehow, like a weight he had been carrying for decades had finally been lifted. He had restructured the organization, dismantled the violent elements, transitioned the legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, import-export, into fully legal operations. It wasn't complete yet, but he was working on it every day. Not for himself, for her. "Ready for your first day?" he asked, reaching her side. Terrified. "You're going to be amazing. Or I'm going to fail spectacularly and embarrass myself in front of a bunch of 20-year-olds. Siajan laughed. It still amazed her how often he laughed now, how freely. "You face down my psychopath brother with a knife at your throat. I think you can handle organic chemistry." Renee smiled, but her expression turned serious. "Are you sure about this? All of it? Leaving the organization behind, starting over?" Siajan took her hands in his. "I spent my whole life becoming someone my father wanted me to be. A weapon, a ruler, a cold, empty shell of a man." He met her eyes. "You showed me I could be something else, someone worth loving." "Siajan, I'm not doing this for you, Renee. I'm doing this because of you, because you made me believe I could be better." He pressed his forehead against hers. "You saved my life that night in the rain. Let me spend the rest of it proving I deserved it." Renee felt tears prick her eyes. She had cried more in the last 6 months than in the previous decade combined. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, oblivious to the students streaming past them toward classes. Then Siajan pulled back and reached into his jacket pocket. "There's something I've been meaning to give you." He pulled out a small box, velvet, ring-sized. Renee's heart stopped. "I know we've only been together for 8 months, Siajan said. "And I know your life just got complicated in ways you never expected. But I also know that I've spent my entire existence waiting for someone like you, someone who would look at me and see a person instead of a monster." He opened the box. The ring inside was simple but elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. Nothing ostentatious, nothing overwhelming. "Just right." "Renee Crawford," Siajan said, "will you marry me?" Time stopped. The world fell away. There was nothing left but this moment, this man, this impossible, terrifying, beautiful future stretching out before her. "Yes," she whispered. Siajan's face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that made passing students whistle and cheer. When they finally broke apart, Renee was laughing and crying at the same time. "We're insane," she said. "Completely. This is never going to work." "Probably not. Your brother is going to break out of prison and try to kill us." "Almost certainly." She looked at the ring on her finger, then up at the man who had changed everything. "I can't wait," she said. And she meant it. Epilogue, the rain. 1 year later, Chicago night, rain. Renee Park, she had taken his name, despite Kareen's horrified protests, stood on the same corner of Michigan Avenue where she had first met her husband. The rain was falling just as hard as it had that night, turning the city into a blur of headlights and neon. But this time, she wasn't alone. Siajan stood beside her, holding an umbrella over both of them. A clear umbrella, just like the one she had held over him all those months ago. "Why are we here again?" he asked. "Because I'm sentimental, and because I wanted to remember." "Remember what?" Renee turned to look at him. Her husband, her partner, her unlikely miracle. "The moment my life changed. The moment I decided to be kind to a stranger in the rain." She smiled. "The moment I fell in love with you, even though I didn't know it yet." Siajan's eyes softened. "You saved me that night." "You saved me too. You just took longer to figure out how." He laughed and pulled her close, and they stood there together in the rain, two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Behind them, the city hummed with life. Somewhere, Karine was planning their one-year anniversary party. Somewhere, Renee's medical school applications were being processed. Somewhere, the future was waiting with all its uncertainty and possibility. But right now, in this moment, there was only this. Two people, one umbrella, and a love story that had started in a storm. And that's where Renee and Siajan's story ends. Or maybe, where it truly begins. But before you go, I need you to think about something. Minyu believed that kindness was weakness. He believed that love made people vulnerable, that caring about others was a liability to be exploited. And for 4 years, rotting in that cell, he convinced himself that the world agreed with him. Maybe some of you watching right now agree with him too. Maybe some of you scrolled through this story waiting for Siajan to fail, waiting for love to crumble, for trust to be betrayed, for the cynics to be proven right. But here's what Minyu never understood, and what I need you to carry with you after this video ends. Kindness isn't weakness, loyalty isn't a trap, and choosing love over cruelty isn't soft. It's the hardest thing any of us can do. Renee chose to stop for a stranger bleeding in the rain. She didn't know who he was, didn't know what helping him would cost her. She just saw someone who needed kindness, and she gave it freely. That choice, that small, selfless choice, changed everything. It saved Siajan. It saved their future. It proved that even in a world full of violence and betrayal, one act of compassion can rewrite destiny. Now I'm going to ask you to make a choice too. If this story meant something to you, if you believe that love can overcome darkness, that kindness can change lives, that choosing mercy over hatred makes you stronger, not weaker, then hit that subscribe button. Right now. Not because I'm asking you to. Because refusing to subscribe means you're walking away from everything this story stood for. It means you're choosing Minyu's side, the side that says love is weakness, the side that says betrayal wins. Don't give him that victory. Subscribe, like this video, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and drop 3 words. Love wins always. That's all, just those 3 words. Let them see. Let everyone who scrolls through these comments see proof, undeniable proof, that Minyu was wrong. Because this channel isn't just about stories, it's about standing for something. And I want to know, do you stand with Renee? Do you stand with Siajan? Or are you going to scroll away and let the villain have the last word? Subscribe and comment now. Love wins always, and your city. I'll be reading every single one. Thank you.